Welcome to the Web of Tomorrow. I'm your host, Riley Carrasquillo, and today I'm going to be interviewing Dave Smith, the engineering director of HireVue. So first I'm going to let Dave Smith give a little bit of an introduction about himself, some of the things that he's doing right now, and some of his passion projects.
Hey everybody, I'm Dave. I've been working at HireVue for just had my 4th anniversary this year.
Oh wow!
So 4 years. And what is a passion project? I'll tell you if I have one. You tell me what it is. I'll tell you if I have one.
Well, I kind of consider this a passion project.
Okay,
this podcast. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Passion projects. You may have. I mean, one of the things that I do for fun is I built my own sprinkler system that I, just cobbled together like hardware from various places online, and you can actually hear about that at a talk I gave last August at a conference called React Rally, where I basically demoed the system and did a little live demo, which is actually pretty crazy at a conference, and talked about the setup, and I used React to build it, and talked about the various pieces of software I used. So anyway, that's one of my passions, is probably tinkering with electronics and little projects on the side like that.
So you're not a lightweight engineer. You're like, you get deep into there.
So is that a fat joke, first of all?
Well, if you look up Dave Smith on the internet and his LinkedIn, do you have a LinkedIn?
Yeah. Good luck finding me, though. I'm really hard to find because my name is so generic.
That's actually true compared to like Riley Carrasquillo. But
yeah.
If you did see him, you'd know that he actually is lightweight in his physicality.
Oh.
Unlike
not
me,
a fat joke. Okay, got it.
So it's not a fat joke. So tell us a little bit more about, you're in charge, or you co-created, co-worked on JavaScript Jabber?
So JavaScript Jabber as a podcast is actually I think it's 4 years old now, and I've only been on it for the last year and a half or so.
Okay.
So it's a weekly podcast about the JavaScript ecosystem. We have guests on every week who are actually really interesting people. The creators of Node, the creators of React, Angular, all the common big web frameworks you've heard of, they've all been on the show. The creator of Webpack, the creator of a new programming language called Elm, which is compiled to JavaScript language. We've had all these people on the show. I'm just a humble panelist, so there's usually 3 or 4 panelists, and we spend about 1% of the time talking and 99% of the time listening and being amazed by really cool guests from the JavaScript ecosystem.
So that's pretty sweet. So for those of you who don't understand what Dave was saying, basically he's the expert version of what Adam and I are trying to do.
Oh.
He's about 3 years ahead of what we're trying to accomplish. But so it's really great to have him on. That's kind of how we feel about you coming on here. Unfortunately, Adam couldn't be here today. Yeah. When I asked you to do this podcast and I asked you to do the hero's journey, you're like, well, does that disqualify me then?
I'm not really a hero.
But the whole idea is the hero of your own story, which we are super interested to hear. Now, just to dial back a little bit, was that why you were at what you were doing at NG conference? Was JavaScript Jabber, or was
so yes and no. We did actually record an episode live on stage at NGConf, which was great. We had the founder of RethinkDB named Mike Lukowski on the show. That episode will be coming out in a couple of weeks. They have a new project called Horizon that they were talking about, which looks to be pretty cool. And so we did record an episode. But no, I was actually at NGConf primarily participating as an interviewer. I was interviewing all the speakers, and we have a live stream, which you can catch on YouTube now. It was called the NG Newsroom.
Oh, so you were actually working in capacity for the conference.
Yeah, so
specifically.
Exactly. So
cool. It
was actually really fun.
So NG conference happens how often?
It's every year. This was the 3rd year.
3rd year. And so that's something really great if you are working with Angular and want to get into learning a little bit more about all the professionals and all the awesome people working there. Where's that located?
The conference?
Yeah.
It's been 3 out of 3 years in Salt Lake City.
Oh, so this is another one. There's other NG conferences.
No, well, okay, so there's NGConf, which is like the main, biggest Angular community conference in the world. There was NG Vegas last year, which was a similar conference, but in Las Vegas. There's NGNL, which they've done 2 years running now in February in Amsterdam. And there's Angular Connect, which is the a European community Angular conference. They're on their second year in London. It'll be this September is their second year. And then finally there's NG Europe, which had their first conference in Paris in October of 2014, and they're coming back this year, I think also in October in Paris again.
Crazy.
So those are all the Angular conferences I know of.
Dang. So what kind of participation do you get?
At NGConf this year, they had over 1,400 attendees.
Wow, that's awesome.
Which, to my knowledge, is the biggest community conference participation count. I mean, other conferences will have more, like Google I/O will have more people than that.
Right.
Angular Connect is going to be around 1,000 people this year. NG Europe back in 2014 had about that number, had about 800, 900 people. So, and it's amazing. NGConf sold out their first year, within a few minutes of listing the tickets.
Really?
Yeah, and then the second year they did the same. So this year they did a lottery, but every lottery wave sold out, within a few minutes. So it's incredibly popular. People love the content and they love the community, as do I. I think the Angular community is awesome.
That's super cool, and that's big things. You're working on big things, and this just goes to show how much more research I should probably do before I do interviews. Because I was actually thinking of the Vegas.
NG Vegas.
NG Vegas. So that's really awesome that we have something local.
Yeah.
That you guys can go to and attend if you can make it out there. So tell us a little bit about what you do here at HireVue.
So here at HireVue, my job, I'm responsible for the engineering and QA efforts of the HireVue team. So we have about 30 developers who work on our web-based application, as well as we have mobile apps, both Android and iOS. We have all kinds of integrations with other companies, and I'm ultimately responsible for all those. The team does all the work. I just sit around and admire how awesome they are. And then we have about a dozen QA people who help keep us all honest and make sure that we don't have bugs, and I am also responsible for their work as well. But again, the team at HireVue deserves all the credit. I have just been lucky enough to be able to participate with them. And so at the end of the day, I just basically sit around sipping lemonade and watching the team work.
That's awesome. Well, and this is a really great team. I work at HireVue, so maybe a little bit biased, but the things that they're doing over here are pretty darn cool.
Yeah, I'm really proud of them.
Yeah, they do some really awesome stuff. So one last thing I will mention, because we have it just recently in common, is that you're really into cycling.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you're a big cycling buff.
Well, I'm not very good at it, but I ride a lot of miles on my road bike every year.
Do you ride to work?
Mm-hmm.
And back? Wow.
Yeah, well, I only live 5 miles away, so it's not really a big deal.
I know. I only live 2.5 miles away, and so when I told my wife, she's like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Which just kind of speaks volumes of how she sees me physically and athletically.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, let's go into this hero's journey story. This is the thing that Adam and I personally, so we think that our viewers like it, or listeners like it a lot, but we just personally love it, hearing about your guys' story, people like you. So let's start off with, why did you decide you wanted to do this?
Well,
how far back does it go?
It goes pretty far back. Do you want kind of the long version with all the details?
Yeah, let's go. Does it start in your childhood? Does it start in college, or where does it start?
Well, I think it starts in high school for me.
Okay.
So probably many of your American listeners had to take some kind of calculus or pre-calculus class, right? You probably did yourself.
I did, yeah.
And when you did that, you probably had to buy a graphing calculator.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to buy one of those?
Yep.
Was it like a TI graphing?
Yeah, it was like Texas Instruments.
Yeah, exactly.
83, TI 83 or something
like
that.
So in my high school, we had the same requirement. And for whatever reason, I decided to buy the TI-82. And the TI-82 was a graphing calculator, so you could punch in equations and it would graph them. But it also had the ability to write little programs.
Yeah.
You remember this?
Yeah, I had friends that programmed little games and stuff.
Exactly. So I didn't really get that at first, but some of my friends were showing me that they could actually write little commands using this really awful keyboard to key in things like draw a circle, open paren, number, comma, number, comma, number, and it would put a circle on the screen. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cute. I can draw circles on the screen. And so I did that a little bit, and then all the real cool kids in my school had TI-85s, and so they could all share their programs with each other. Because you could like plug them in with like a headphone jack, and they could actually exchange programs and be like, I wrote this program, now try it out. It was basically open source in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that same year I took a physics class, and in the physics class, one of the things we studied was the, I can't remember the name of the equation, but it's the equation that governs the free fall of something to Earth. This is actually a polynomial, so it's actually like, it's got like 3 terms, x squared plus x, plus a constant gravitation. Anyway, it's like 9.8 meters per second squared is like the gravitational constant, right? And so at some point during the school year, it occurred to me that I could make a line, like a dot, draw on the screen and fall as if it were falling to Earth by just plugging in that equation into a little program and then just like iterating through the frames and like drawing a point and let it fall, right?
Oh, cool.
And like, start it up at this point and let it fall. And then I realized like I can make this a little game where I say, okay, I'm going to put a randomly placed target on the ground, and then I'm going to have like a little airplane that's coming across at a certain velocity at a certain altitude, and then you have to like pick when to drop the bomb, and it'll fall at both moving horizontally and also falling and accelerating to the Earth like an object would fall to the Earth in a vacuum with no air friction. Right?
Right.
And like that was like super fun for me. And so I would make it was like the lamest game ever. Like you would type in a velocity and an altitude, and then it would fly and drop the bomb, and you would see if you could hit the target. Right? Like crazy. So that was basically the first time I ever programmed anything, and I stared at that stupid TI-82 screen for hours. And there was no Google to like say like how do I do this, right? It was just like try something, see it fail, try again, see it fail, over and over and over, ask a friend, maybe. And so that's what I did. So I spent a year in high school just like programming that dumb little TI calculator. And some of my friends who I had just major hero worship for made really involved games on their calculators that were like crazy sophisticated. A little shout out to my friend Clint, who made a game called Pongbert Races, where you would build a car with you'd like pick the wheels, pick the motor, and you could like pay money to upgrade the motor, not real money, like in-game money.
Right, yeah.
And then you'd race other cars, and they could race each other using the little like connector cable. Anyway, I always thought those guys are the hero. Like those guys are the amazing programmers. I just never thought that I could be like a great programmer like those guys could. But that's basically how I got my start.
That's really interesting that you're saying that though. Like we literally just did an episode about the imposter syndrome and how kind of rampant it is among developers and programmers. Yeah. I mean, admittedly, both to me what you did is amazingly cool, because I didn't even think about that in high school. You know what I thought about was acting and theater. Like I always thought my other friends were the ones that were the developers, the smart people. Yeah. I mean, we don't even go that far as calling them developers. I would just call them the smart computer people. Sure. They knew how to do computer stuff. So that's kind of cool that's really interesting to hear that you, even at that age, you're already doing something that almost no one else was doing probably in your school other than your group of friends.
Yeah, those nerdy guys who I worshipped.
Yeah. Which actually, first off, is really cool because that whole idea of connecting something to play each other in the 90s is really cool, because when did the Pokemon, then you could actually play Pokemon, I think that wasn't until the early 2000s that you could do that. And that
was after my time.
That was after your time?
Yeah, I never
no
did
Pokemon.
No, I just missed it by a couple of years.
Yeah, just because that was the pervading game of my childhood. That and Power Rangers and stuff like that.
Yeah, I missed that. I was just old enough to make fun of people who liked Power Rangers as a kid, because I was just on the I'm the cool teenager mode when they were coming on the scene. Yeah.
So you got to actually enjoy the 80s though a little bit.
Yeah. I mean,
which is super cool.
I lived through all of the 80s. I was probably only cognizant of it for the latter half of the 80s, but yeah, I wore the peg pants. As long as we're talking about the 80s. Young people wear their pants, the bottom of their pants, how they cuff them a little bit and peg them. We did that as 6 and 7 year olds and 8 year olds in the 80s. So that's totally.
So that's where it started.
I don't know. I mean, it went out of fashion, but now it's back, which
that's
is
really funny.
Weird.
Actually, I've never even thought about 80s fashion, and I mean, I've thought about 80s fashion, but not that specific thing. You think about like the jackets and the hair and everything like
not
that.
The pegged pants.
All the Breakfast Club stuff, basically.
Yeah.
That's super awesome. I am super envious of you because I always when people ask me like what era I would have liked to live in, it would have been the 80s. I would have loved to experience like all the 80s movies as they came out in theater.
Yeah, you didn't miss out on that much.
Okay, so how did that continue? Like, how did that develop into like something that's like career worthy or even like career aspirations?
At the time, I just never thought that it would have anything to do with a career. There's no way. That just wasn't even on my mind. And talking about imposter syndrome, I never had imposter syndrome. I've never had it. I don't know, for whatever reason, it's just not something that I've been stricken with, and that's
good.
Well, yeah, which has been good. But I think it was not so much because I was good at anything. It was because I just, like for me, getting into programming, it was just fun. Like I was like, oh, this is cool. And if I'm not good at it, like I didn't care. Like I didn't really have anything that I was like on the line for with it. And so I think when you're in a situation where you're like faking it till you make it, you feel the imposter syndrome, you feel that like weight. I think it's because there's a lot tied up in that. Like you have this identity that is vulnerable and threatened by not being good at this thing, and you really want to be part of that. But you got to remember, like when I grew up, I kept it a secret that I wrote these little programs on my calculator because like it wasn't cool to do that. And like there were a lot of people in my school that would have made fun of me and really picked on me if they had known that I spent hours doing that. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you don't feel like it's like that now, do you?
Well, I think that the world has changed a lot, and we've gotten to the point where we worship people like Bill Gates and Mark. What's his name? Zuckerberg.
Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg.
Like these guys are heroes in our worlds, right? But when I was a kid, those figures didn't exist. Right? Like no one had ever heard of Bill Gates in the early '90s. I mean, I knew who he was. Actually, I don't even think I knew who he was in the '90s. And so, like it was really not cool to do that. And so if anything, I was an imposter in very different ways. Like I was trying to be the popular cool kid and, hang out with all the cool kids and do those cool things. And the last thing I would want them to know is that I programmed on my calculator. So things have changed a lot. And now I am actually really happy they have because I think it's a shame. There's probably a lot of people my age who could have gone into programming or become developers, but who were scared off because of the stigma of being nerdy or, kind of a social outcast.
Whoa, this is very different than the conversations we've had because obviously Adam and I are close. We're almost exactly the same age. Mm-hmm. And so we haven't ever come from this. Yeah. Adam started in high school as well. But he was very open about it. He didn't. It was right when it was kind of like that grid system for JavaScript, where you can just you had to use, I guess, Photoshop to break apart your images so you could place them in and make it a cool looking whatever. I remember in middle school, I used to make websites with Microsoft Office and
I did that
with some of that stuff and everyone thought that was cool. In fact, I remember all my friends were hoping that they would let us do more of that. Mm-hmm. And then they obviously moved on to other things. And then I never touched it again. I remember, in fact, and this is actually still a website that I've found recently, but I used to use flamingtext.com all the time to get my cool
Yep. Did it render a Java applet or was it an animated GIF that it would make?
It was an animated GIF.
Okay. Yeah, we had those in the late 90s, but they were usually Java applets. And so you would type in text and it would put it on the inside the applet and make a ripple effect or a flaming effect.
Right, yeah, I remember exactly. That. And I didn't understand anything.
Yeah, you're just poking around at it.
Oh yeah, I was just I was just trying to do whatever I could to make my website look
And that's
cool.
how I was too. I mean, when I made my first website, I think I used Microsoft Publisher. I think. I'm trying to remember. It could have been Microsoft Word, save as HTML. And I got to tell you, by the time I went to college, which was in the late 90s, 1997, I never again in the rest of my life have I ever felt embarrassed about being a, quote, computer nerd. Those feelings are just gone. And it was basically I think I grew out of, wanting people to see me a certain way. And I think also our culture has grown up a little bit. And they've realized that there's actually a lot of value in being the computer nerd. And so, whether you're a boy, whether you're a girl, it doesn't matter. I think there's some value. I don't know if some of that linger, some of that negative connotation, but I pretty much shed that when I went to college. And thank goodness, too, because what a crappy way to live, right? So it was at the point that I went to college that my journey almost went off the rails, because I told myself I could never sit in front of a computer all day for a job. And so I did not enroll in computer science like some of my friends did.
Oh, really? What'd you do?
I enrolled in mechanical engineering, and I hated it. Like, I thought that I would love mechanical engineering because I liked playing with Legos, right? Like, I like building stuff. But it turns out Legos are a lot more like computer programming than mechanical engineering.
Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so mechanical engineering is it's about all kinds of, more hard sciences, statics, materials science and things like that. And that stuff just wasn't interesting to me at all, And so I did a year of mechanical engineering, and after a year I was just like, I hate this. Like, I really don't like it. It was at this point that I decided to serve a church mission. And I spent 2 years away from the entire college world. But while I was out on my mission, I got assigned to work on a computer thing. It was basically like collecting statistics and information about how the mission was going. And I stumbled across some Visual Basic code while I was doing this that someone else had written. And it came up on the screen. I still remember the first time I saw it. And it was all syntax colored. And so, like, this is the first time in my life that I've ever seen code fill a whole computer screen and be all these different colors. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa! And I remember I closed the window right away. I'm like, I should not be here. It's like I had stumbled into a room I wasn't allowed to be in.
Yeah.
And I closed that window right away. I'm like, okay, I don't want to break anything. I'm going to get out of this thing, right?
So it's kind of accidental. That
I think I clicked some button, and it was like it opened up the code that was behind this. It was a Microsoft Access database, and I saw the code, and I'm like, oh no, close that. So I closed it. And then over the course of the next few months, I gradually got back into that idea a little bit and ended up writing a bunch of Visual Basic code while I was there to manage generate reports and, it was all these interesting mission statistics, And I remember we didn't have internet connection, but I would print the Microsoft Access documentation from their help guide, and I would take it with me in taxi rides and stuff, and I would just be reading page after page of Microsoft Visual Basic, Microsoft Access documentation. And it was crazy. So that's basically how I learned the very, very beginnings of programming, was from that.
That's incredibly interesting.
Isn't it weird?
Yeah, like in your church mission, that's where you start actually playing around with that stuff.
So I came back, and I told myself that I would take that time to decide what I wanted to do for my major at college. And when I came back, I realized I hadn't really deliberately spent any time thinking about it. And so I don't actually know what happened, but at some point I was looking through, what do you call, the course selection guide for college. I'm just reading through all these different majors and the classes, and I stumbled across computer science. And I looked at all these subjects, the names of the courses, and I was like, these sound awesome. It was machine learning, data structures, databases, networking. And I'm like, whoa, this is super cool. So I'm like, this is it, I'm doing it. So I enrolled in computer science that year, and I just got on fire. I mean, I took way more than the recommended course load, and I finished my computer science degree in 3 years after having used a year in mechanical engineering. I started on year 2, and I finished by the end of year 4. It's I just boogied through that thing. There was one semester where I took 4 computer science, and they were like, look, you should never take more than 3, and probably only 2. And I'm like, okay, how about 4?
Yeah.
So anyway, it was just love. From that point, I was just in love. And I did great in those courses because it was when you really love something, it's not work, right?
Yeah.
It's not hard. It's not arduous. I would spend hours and hours in the computer labs working on projects, and I just loved it. It didn't feel like work anymore.
We were talking about how if you love the end result, or if there's a majority of that process, when I was learning the very beginning basics of JavaScript, and they typically when you're learning this stuff, they'll take you through and have you make a game or something.
Yeah, something to keep you interested.
Yeah, some kind of toy problem or a game or something. And I was making this game, and I remember I was just so frustrated because I was doing I just kept making mistakes, and I'm like that. It wasn't the best at attention to detail stuff sometimes.
Okay.
But it was just so fun. It was like a game. It was okay, there is a challenge here. And I remember, and this is kind of where our experiences differ probably quite a bit, but I have obviously a lot of like Stack Overflow and
yeah.
internet information to help me. And I remember going through it, and I got to this point where like I just couldn't find the answer to my problem. Like I actually had to figure out the answer.
Like you couldn't find it on Stack Overflow, you mean?
Yeah, I couldn't find it on Stack Overflow. I couldn't find it on Google, like on a forum or anything.
You had to actually like bear down and figure it out.
I actually had to figure it out on my own. And I remember thinking, crap, like I'm not going to enjoy this. And that was actually probably the most enjoyable part of the whole process to me, was like when I figured it out, I remember I stood up and put my hands in the air.
Yeah.
And my wife walked out and she was like, what are you doing? I'm like,
that's the best.
I just figured out this thing. And I know what goes into it now, and it's actually really fun. What is the language that you mostly work in now?
Today I mostly work in Python and JavaScript.
What kind of got you... Were you doing that before HireVue? Or?
No, not really. The reason I came to HireVue was actually to be able to completely reboot and try a completely different set of tools and skills. Prior to HireVue, I was writing 90% of my time I was writing C++.
Oh, okay.
Prior to that, I wrote a bunch of Java code back in the day, and like I just like starting over on something totally new.
Interesting.
Occasionally, and so that's why I came to HireVue 4 years ago.
You like the learning experience?
Yeah, like if I'm not learning and being challenged, I get bored.
Yeah.
Quick. So.
Are you getting bored right now?
No.
Am I challenging you yet?
Even a little bit. So one of the things I wanted to mention was something that it took me a lot of years to realize was actually happening in my life, was the role that privilege played in me coming into this profession. Like when we were just talking about this, like when you look back at what I said, you know, someone gave me a TI-82 calculator, and then I had time given to me to be able to play with this thing. And then later, you know, while I was serving a church mission, someone put me in this place to where I could do this and be on this computer and have access to, no pun intended, to Microsoft Access, you know, like,
yeah.
And then later going to college and having that opportunity, like, these are opportunities that not everyone in the world is just automatically given, you know, and I certainly didn't work to earn these things. Now I did good things with them once I had them. It's not like I squandered these opportunities, but I just think it's important to acknowledge the role that privilege can play in someone's life like this, and especially in mine. So I think that's an important thing to consider, you know, like not everybody is given that. And I hear this time and again from people that I admire in the industry. Almost all of them say something like, well, as a kid, my mom bought me this cool computer that I was able to get started on, you know? Yeah. And it's like, well, what would have happened if you hadn't been just given that opportunity? You know, what would happen? And it's like, well, who knows, right?
Yeah, it's almost philosophical to think about. I don't know, what kind of statement are you saying? Like, do you think that it's easier for people to be programmers if they have privilege?
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Do you think that people who have no privilege will become good programmers?
Look, I think everybody in the world can become good at being a developer. Now, not everyone wants to, and that's fine. But is it a leg up if someone plunks a computer down in your hands and then gives you time and you don't have to work like 2 jobs when you're in high school to make ends meet? Yeah, of course that's a leg up. That's a huge leg up.
Yeah.
Now, could you do it without being handed that? Probably. But will it be harder? Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, and I think it's important that people like me who have been given a lot acknowledge that and own that and not just say like, well, you know, I just worked really hard and that's why I have all this awesome stuff in my life and that's why I've been able to become a developer. Like, no, like that's definitely part of it. But there's a big foundation there that I didn't earn and that I didn't work for, that was just given to me. And that's, you know, I'm grateful for it. But I think it's important to acknowledge that.
I think anyone that really wants to and to be a programmer can be. Mm-hmm. I also say that you might want to take a step back and actually see if you really do want to.
If you want to. I think that's probably one of the most important factors. Is like, do you actually really want to do this? And if you don't, like, that's cool. That's fine. Find out what it is you do want to do and do that instead. You'll probably be happier and more successful.
Yeah, because it's not easy. It's not an easy path. This kind of goes into this. What is your advice to teenagers, to people in college that are thinking about going this route? I guess I'm especially interested about advice towards teenagers because sometimes they're thinking about this way before they'll actually be able to do it.
Well, I'll tell you this. Never, I believe, never in the history of humanity has there ever been a profession that is so accessible and yet so lucrative and rewarding as is software development.
Mm-hmm.
And the avenues that you can take to get there are really numerous. Like maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was like, well, there's one track. You go to college, you get a computer science degree, and then you get a job, right? But today, there's like 1,000 tracks, and the computer science college degree is like one of 1,000 different ways to get into this profession. On my team right now, I have had 2 English majors. I've had 2 kids who are literally teenagers. One of them was so young that his mother had to like co-sign his employment agreement, and just every other different discipline and avenue you can think of that have come to this profession, and they've all been great contributors. So the fact is, I mean, you can teach yourself these days. You can take a class like a boot camp. You can go to college, or you can do any other number of things to get into this profession, all of which were pretty much closed doors 15 years ago, you know? And part of that is because the internet has enabled this, but part of it is also because the barrier to entry is coming down. Like, it used to be you had to be pretty serious to understand what the heck a pointer was in C. Like you had to like really understand the system and how memory management works and like all this stuff. Yeah. But now like I can open up my developer console in my browser that I use every day, and I can just start typing code right there. Like, I literally use my browser every day, and I think most people listening to this podcast probably use a web browser every day. You can open that and start writing JavaScript right now. That was something that was just unheard of 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So yeah, like my advice to you is, you know, the first question is, you know, should I go into software development? And I think that only you can answer that question for yourself. I don't think I can tell you yes or no. But I can tell you that if you love it and you are excited by it, like maybe you've tried a little bit and you're like, this is really cool, you should probably seriously consider pursuing. If you've tried it a little bit and it seems like really foreign to you and really awful and it just doesn't excite you, the notion of building something out of writing code doesn't excite you, it might not be for you, but it might. And see, that's the thing, like I can't really tell you. And so maybe after you were struggling a little bit, Riley, and you kind of worked through it, and then at some point you had this moment where you were like, this is the best thing ever, right? Yeah. But up to that point, it wasn't nearly as exciting for you, right? So maybe that moment for, you know, every listener that's listening to this right now, maybe that moment is right around the corner. Maybe it's 10 years out, or maybe it will never come. And I think that's the hardest thing about this, is you just don't know if you're going to be into it or not. So I would say that, you know, if you're even on the fence, I would say try it, because the cost to try it is so low. There's Codecademy, there's Khan Academy, there's Code School, all these different ways to learn that just they only cost your time. You know, so if you have that time, you should definitely try it. And then figure it out. You know, if you love it or not, you could try it. So I don't know, is that what you're looking for?
I think so. I think that's pretty cool. I'm not fishing.
Sure. More or less.
I'm not like trying to reel anything in.
Okay.
I just love hearing your insider knowledge and your insider experience, really, because that's one thing that I don't have as much, and so that's why we bring you guys on here, our wonderful guests. I really do appreciate you joining us. You guys should go out and check Dave Smith's podcast out, JavaScript Jabber.
Yep.
Which I actually said correctly for the first time.
Good job.
I didn't realize how much of a tongue twister that was going to be for me.
Jabber.
JavaScript
Jabber, Java.
If you're looking for something a lot more involved and a little bit more in depth, then JavaScript Jabber is great. And we actually have referenced them several times in the past.
Oh, that's cool.
Rate, subscribe, comment. We love to hear from you. Let us know what sort of things you'd like to hear. And we'll see you next time.